Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. And there you go, Illini fans. That is the complete performance you have not been seeing during this 7-game win streak, though you have been winning. But that was a feel-good victory of what a top 5 team in the country looks like, what a national title contender, a Big Ten title contender looks like, as Illinois defeats Minnesota 94-63. They go into Williams Arena and dominate a Minnesota team. Now, I know they had some injuries. I know they were shorthanded with Kalsher out, and Liam Robbins was not himself. But Iowa didn't win there, Michigan didn't win there, and Ohio State didn't win there. So let's talk about it in the Illini Inquirer podcast. I'm Jeremy Warner, Illini Inquirer publisher, with Joey Wagner. We are at home. Derek Piper is in Williams Arena, which is actually one of my favorite places to visit because it's so unique, Joey. But Illinois hasn't liked visiting there. Most teams haven't liked visiting there. But today it was a pretty good home for Illinois basketball. What a win.
Okay, so you got the stuff we need to get out of the way, right? No Gabe Kalsher, no Liam Robbins. Okay, let's move forward because, oh my gosh, that was from everywhere, right? I mean, it was obviously Io has this triple-double, and that's one of the things. This is the second time in 2 weeks. Like, okay, that happened, and then all this other stuff happened too. It's crazy how that is. But when we were talking during the game, Jeremy, I went back to the Nebraska game in my mind where 5 guys scored the basketball. And they won, and it wasn't pretty. And then you get here, and it's just boom, 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 and everywhere there are points. Literally I don't want to say everybody, a lot of guys scored, and they had 6 guys who scored at least 5 points. They had Curbelo and DeMonte Williams were close, and that is kind of what I think. When we've kind of looked at this team, like where does this fit for what's the next step for this? Because it can't just be all Io and Kofi. We're not foolish enough to think that.
No.
And then this happens. And then it was just everyone, everywhere. And it was something else.
I think we can get into that a little, Joey. Like when the supporting cast is good, Illinois is national championship good. And that's not hyperbole, right? Like when they get people other than Io and Kofi to help and score, they are great because I think defensively, they've been pretty consistently good over the 7-game win streak. And I think that's why you have a long win streak while a team like Iowa hasn't. And that's why I didn't pick Iowa to win the Big Ten, is because I just didn't think they defended consistently. For that 1 or 2 nights, they don't shoot well. Illinois can win those games. And Illinois can win games, Joey, where those other supporting cast doesn't play well, because Io DeSumo was one of the greatest players Illinois has ever had. Kofi Coburn, one of the greatest post players Illinois has ever had. And when you have those 2 guys, you have a chance. But I was looking it up at halftime. The Illini are 5-4 when 3 or fewer players score in double digits. They're now 11-1, 8-1 against high major opponents when 4 or more players score in double digits. And I think you probably got some stats on when they get so many to score 5+, just even that kind of contribution. This team can play with Baylor. They can play with Gonzaga when they have guys who can do that. I mean, even against Baylor that first time, they had 4 or 5 guys scoring double digits, and they had chances in that game. So when they have that, 15 points from Trent Frazier, 12 a season high from Grandison, Curbelo playing good ball, Georgie Bashaniashvili giving good energy off the bench. And even I thought Adam Miller had good moments overall where you kind of saw little parts of his game defensively, rebounding, passing the ball, the dunk. Yeah, we had never seen that before. His points were late, but when you get that kind of overall contribution where everyone's kind of pulling a little weight, this team is, national title, Final Four good.
My paper's all the way across the room from me. I think it's 12-2 they are when they have 6 guys score 5 or more points. The 2 losses, Baylor and Ohio State, they're number 1 seeds. Like those 2, I don't know that, a lot would have mattered in those 2 games. Those are 2 really, really good teams. And that is, and then I went back to the Missouri game, right? And Io put up, 33 maybe? I'm drawing a blank. He put up a lot of points, and Brad's like, yeah, that's not it for me. I don't love that. And this is why, like, this is what Brad wants. And Io said it, they want to hedge the screens and try to take the ball out of his hands and make life miserable. And there was maybe even last year, early part of last year, definitely his freshman year, you could do that because there weren't the scoring options around him. And I think he's probably also grown as a facilitator even throughout this year. But maybe not even grown, but we're just seeing more of that aspect of his game, maybe because there are more weapons. And that's a part of his game that, like, we know he can score. We know when he gets in transition, he can go baseline to baseline, put a player on skates and score like it's nothing. But Illinois has just not had to ask him to be this facilitator because they couldn't afford it. Everything that they wanted to do was riding on him scoring a lot of points. And really last year it worked, and you saw a little bit of that fall away as Kofi started to establish himself in the second to the back half of that season. And now it's all starting to come together. And they said there's still, a ways to go where they want to be. And I mean, okay. They look really.
Well, you're starting to see Joey. I mean, he had 21 against Wisconsin in a triple double. He had 31 against Nebraska. He can go do that, right? But he also, over his last 4 games, has 33 assists, right? And that's part of, he makes the right decisions, right? Like, he doesn't have to just score. He doesn't have to hog the ball. Like Marcus Carr, he really today had to try and score 30. And Trent Frazier made that difficult. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But we're getting to this National Player of the Year conversation, and it's no slight to Luka Garza, Iowa people. Luka Garza is having a National Player of the Year season. And here's the thing, Kofi Cockburn, I'm glad Bardo said it. Yeah, most years, Kofi Cockburn would possibly win a Big Ten Player of the Year award and be a first-team All-American. And if Iowa wasn't on his team, he certainly would be that probably. But Ayo Dosunmu is putting himself in that conversation, and not just because his overall play, his stats, like, yes, Garza scoring more, Garza gets more rebounds because he's a big man, but Ayo, it makes a contribution in every aspect. His efficiency is through the roof. He's a great 3-point shooter now. He's better defensively than Garza is. So you can make these arguments, but as you and I know, Joey, it's not just about that. It's about narrative. It's about having moments like that matter in college basketball and having a team that is one of the best teams in the country. And right now, over the last couple of weeks, with Illinois on a 7-game win streak, fighting for a number 1 seed, maybe starting on Monday, Joey, with Michigan or Ohio State losing, Illinois might be on that number 1 seed line and in second place in the Big Ten, right? That's better for Ayo than it is for Garza. I think everyone kind of assumed Garza would win it, right, coming into this year. And now all of a sudden, Ayo is doing this, a triple-double, followed by the end of that Nebraska game where he absolutely carried Illinois, the end of that Northwestern game where he absolutely carried them to a win, and now another triple-double. 2 triple-doubles in the last 4 games. Illinois had 2 of them in their entire history before this month. It's nuts, and that's what's going to help him. Is I think there's momentum and there's a narrative now for Ayo Dosunmu. So for me, flip a coin between those two. And at the end of the day, if we've talked about it, we did the roundtable. If Illinois wins the Big Ten, Ayo Dosunmu should win it, probably, in my opinion. If they finish 3rd and Garza and Iowa are 4th, then it becomes a flip of the coin for me. But for those Iowa people, it's not that Garza's not good enough for it. It's just, I think a lot of things are starting to swing in Dosunmu's way. It's special moments, and it's winning, and it's him just having one of the best seasons we've ever seen in an Illini uniform.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, if Illinois wins the Big Ten, that means we think, and a lot can shape out, but they're going to need to beat 2 of the 3 of, or at least 2 of the 3 of Wisconsin, at Ohio State, at Michigan.
I think, Joey, they probably have to win out, right?
They probably do. Yeah.
Because Michigan's got, they got Ohio State once or twice still. But Illinois is going to have to beat Michigan and have to beat Ohio State, right, to win the Big Ten, or at least have a share of the Big Ten. And if they're going to do it by win percentage, Michigan has an advantage there just because they're not playing as many games. So they only have Ohio State once. They got Michigan State twice, Indiana, and we see Indiana today. I think Michigan's beating them. I don't think Michigan loses more than 3 games.
No, I don't either. So okay, let's say they have to win out. We both know well enough that if they win out, Ayo Dosunmu is exactly one of the 2 reasons they have won out. That's a pretty good thing to put on your resume, is you won the Big Ten and you went to Wisconsin, which isn't as great right now, but it's still at Wisconsin. You've gone to Michigan, and really what may well be the Big Ten championship game, and you've gone to Ohio State, and you've beaten those 3, which is what it's going to take.
12 straight wins it would take.
12 straight wins. That's crazy. But they're playing really well right now. So we have that, and that's pretty good. And to be fair, Luka Garza, yes, right? Like, yes, he should. Like, anyone can debate the merits of who's going to win. But what's really not a debate is this thing belongs to be, there deserves a conversation around this award. And if you're an Illinois fan, if you're an Iowa fan, that is fun. Like, dude, sure, you're going to get fired up and you're going to defend your guy.
Well,
Illinois,
here's my problem is like people belittle like, oh, Luka Garza, he did it against this team that doesn't defend the post. I'm like, dude, he scored 30 something points. Like I know Wisconsin's a little soft right now in the middle, but Garza still tore him up, right? You don't. I mean, just because DeSumo did it against Northwestern or Nebraska, you're not belittling that. These guys are playing Big Ten basketball. They're both awesome and great representatives of college basketball.
and what Io has, I think, in his favor, and maybe there's a little bit of like the NFL goes to the quarterback. Do guards have the ball in their hand and they can create? And when Io can create, he can create the moments. And those moments, we've talked about it, I've written about it, they matter a lot. And how, like, yeah, Luka had 33. That is a moment. That is certainly a moment. And that's not to take away from what he's able to do when he's scoring the ball like that. And those are big things. But there is maybe a different perception from people who don't follow it as closely, who would see a guy like Io have these moments that captivate or that rally to a win. And I'm not trying to take away anything from Luka. If he wins this thing, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world to me. But I just think that there's a little bit of that guard bias for some people who just see somebody creating like that, right, wrong, or what, that might exist in some people's eyes. So it's a conversation, man. It's a fun conversation to have. Illinois has not had this conversation in a while.
And you know who I think is probably going to win it is the guy who wins more games to end the season, right? Like if Iowa wins 4 of their last 5, beats Michigan, beats Ohio State, finishes top 3 in the Big Ten, I think it's a lot better chance for Garza. But if Illinois finishes top 2 in the Big Ten and they only win or lose one more game and they're a number 1 seed, I think it's going to be him. I think it's going to be Io. So this is fun. It makes it, and you know what? Brad Underwood and his staff are thinking about it too, because it'd be a nice thing to have on their resume to have a national player of the year. They're already going to have a first team All-American. And I think I would assume was certainly is playing his way into a first round draft conversation, because why wouldn't you want that guy on your team? But they kept him in there to get the triple double. I would have advised against it. And you could tell Brad Underwood really was struggling with it. One, he didn't want to show up Rick Pitino in Minnesota. But 2, like there's that injury factor. He sat Kofi, and that was the smart play. I don't know if it was a smart play to leave Io in, but he got the triple double and he stayed healthy. So
you look, I thought, and Brad said about the same. It's like 3:30. It got to that under 4 timeout, and I'm like, he's not gonna like. I don't imagine this goes any further than 2:30. Like after that, it's like, dude, if you didn't get 1 rebound in a minute and a half, sorry, right? Like this is just not worth the rest of our games here. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that. I don't think Brad is somebody, and he said it, he recognizes those moments and what that means. But he also really respects the dude across the scorers table from him. And I remember even after the Northwestern game, the blitzing in Evanston, he was like, hey, wait a minute here. That's not what Chris Collins does. So I think that really pulled on him a lot too. So to that degree, like, yeah, I'm a little surprised he put him in there. But I think also it's like, if Io says he's going to get a rebound in a minute, like you're probably going to lean to believe that. So, man,
it's his.
Man.
It's his. I mean, 2 and 4 games. We haven't seen one in 20 years. You talked to Serge a week ago about it, and it's really hard to do. And Mark Smith, back in who a lot of people say is one of the most underrated players in Illinois history, who's played here in the 70s and 80s. Like he was a fantastic player. But think of all the players who haven't. I mean, D never got one. Darren never got one. Kendall Gill, Nick Andrews, like those guys. Yeah, Frank never got one. That's amazing. It's amazing what he's doing. And I know we say it every podcast now, but I mean, the next time there are fans in that stadium, like that jersey's in the rafters, and I think Kofi's is too. And Kofi has a quiet 22-6 tonight in 24 minutes and dominated on the interior, made his free throws. This is a special team, man, with 2 really special players at the top of it.
First of all, if I'm Brad, I am lobbying for every afternoon, like 2:30 tip-off on Fox, because he's 2 for 2 in triple doubles in those so far in the last 2 weeks. And if I was the player of the year, that's got to be his Zoom background for every guard he ever recruits is, hey, this guy here. But there is so much about this team. And Brad talked about it, and he said it's going to sound corny. And I thought, Okay, well, what's going to sound corny here because we'll see. And he said they're smiling. Like, yeah, that did sound a little corny, but you can see it. Like there's definitely that chemistry about the team and that the way that they carry themselves and the way that they, even some of the passes, like, and I think Bardo alluded to it, like when Andre Curbelo had that behind the back between two defenders to Kofi, he's like, no, I would have been sitting. I would have been sitting for that. And there are some players who might be like, hey, dude, we're trying to, but they kind of let themselves be who they are. And I think they really enjoy that and being around who they are. And again, it didn't show up as much early as they figured all the pieces out.
Yeah.
But you can really start to see it here in this, especially in this win streak, and really parsing it a little deeper.
Well, those special teams, right, that you watch, like whether for Illini fans it's 0405, or I think of some of those Villanova teams that won the national championship with all those guards who played incredibly well together, or you think of those Golden State Warrior teams. But it's like they just move as one,
Yep.
right? And at times this team doesn't look like that, but when they're clicking, they have that kind of special quality where it's like these extra passes they made today, 27 assists on 37 field goals, locked in defensively. You saw some of the defensive rotations. I remember one where Georgie got out on somebody. It was just like, that is exactly.
I think called that out.
Yeah. And it's like, that's
those, like, you see it on offense and obviously the passes, but on defense. And that's what Brad's talked about defense since literally like the second he stepped in Champaign. But like when they move and they rotate like that, and anything that you think might be something is no longer something, that is what really, to me, shows that chemistry.
And I just think it's a roster that's, I think this group always had like a great mix of players, talent, personality, right? Like you have this dog in Io who's like, that's the lead guy. Everyone knows that's the lead guy. He's our guy who's serious, but he also is our leader, and he acts like a leader. He takes people out to eat, right? He gets in the car with people, and he's just the guy you go to. He's the serious one. He's the Jordan. But you also have Kofi, who's just this mammoth, right? But also full of life. And he's kind of been an energy guy. Like his motor has just run. And usually you don't get that from big men.
You pointed it out last Northwestern game, right? Dude's jumping all over. He's not to interrupt you, but I remember sitting when they were at Northwestern was there, and Kofi, like, you just don't see 7-footers jumping around like that and literally screaming. So sorry, but yes. Yeah.
Because you usually have to get big guys revved up, right? Because usually they play basketball because they're told to play basketball. Like Kofi loves it and he wants to be great. Trent Frazier's the senior, right? Who gets after it, has a lot of personality outgoing wise. DeMonte doesn't show us his personality, but I know he has it with the team. But he's another senior, right? That just gets it and is smart. But then you add this flashy freshman and Andre Curbelo, and yeah, it's bad. But those plays can just energize a team. Right. And to have that guy come off the bench and be like that, we know the energy Georgie brings. So I just think it's this nice mix of like veterans who know how to play, know when to rev it up. And I think you're seeing Io kick this team into high gear. Like he told us after game, there's a huge sense of urgency now that I think we didn't see a month ago when they had those couple losses. Now that they've had those setbacks, they know, hey man, this thing's fleeting, and they've kicked it into high gear. And some nights it doesn't look great, but when they need it, that Io revs it up, Kofi revs it up, this whole team does, and they find a way to win games. But I just think this roster, as we're kind of talking about, it is finding, like, I think they're in a really good place right now, Joey. They could lose one of these upcoming games that you don't want to lose, like Michigan State, who played well today, or they could lose to Ohio State or Michigan because those teams are good. But like I think this team, it feels good about itself, feels confident. And I think Brad is starting to feel that too. Like you're starting to feel this is almost March. Like this is the time where memories are made and the legend of this team, or not, right, is made.
Yeah, I don't think winning out and having this chemistry are two mutually exclusive things. Right. I think you can certainly still have that and lose a basketball game. And there's a little swagger to Brad Underwood right now. Let's not kid ourselves, man. He's pretty laid back and talking to us. I don't think it was like snappy, but he was asked about, hey, you're going to be on the road for the next forever. He's like, don't care. Just bring it. Like, and there's got to be a fatigue, right, of talking about this ever-changing schedule. I get that, but like, that's a pretty swagger Brad Underwood right there.
You just said bring them on, right? Just bring them on. I don't care who's next. We'll play them. We're feeling good. And we have to be great. And his team has to be tough. He knows with the Big Ten. Like, I don't think it was a snap at other Big Ten schools like, hey, this is nothing. We got this. It was more just hey, bring this on. This is what we want. This is what you have to do to win Big Ten championships. And we're doing it, even though it's not perfect sometimes. It doesn't look pretty sometimes, and other times it does, like today. But either way, this team finds a way to win games in different kind of ways.
And I think it, all roads kind of come back to Io here. And he said today, he said, look, this win is no different than Northwestern to me. And when your best guy, your leader, the guy who's in front of I get like the Jordan montage from The Last Dance when he's going on his thing, and he's like, when your guy is saying that, that's real. Like that is real. I don't think Io cares. I mean, obviously everybody probably wants to win in the best fashion they can win, but for him to come out and to lead that charge, and dude, what he says, kind of seems like it goes like with his teammates, right? So if he's thinking that, I don't imagine the other guys are like, well, nope, I think that's it. And that's what it's going to be.
There's this long time, Joey, where I covered this team and there just wasn't an alpha. There wasn't I mean, Dimitri McCamey was a phenomenal player. He was not an alpha. Malcolm Hill, phenomenal player, was not an alpha. Tracy Abrams, I thought, was a good leader, but he just wasn't good enough to be an alpha, right? Like, this guy is that. He's the first guy probably since Darren, those guys, that is a true alpha dog and is a true All-American. That's why you haven't had one since then. And that's what it looks like. I do want to give out a shout out to Trent Frazier, career high 6 steals. And I thought he played even better defense than that. Marcus Carr has to hate seeing orange, Joey, because the last 3, he's played Illinois 3 times. He's 9 for 36 shooting. That's 25% with 35 points. He has fewer points than he does shot attempts against Illinois. And he has 8 assists to 7 turnovers. I mean, he's one of the best playmakers in the Big Ten. I don't think he's not a first team guy for me, and I'm debating whether he's a second team guy for me. I think there's a lot of empty calories at times with Marcus Carr at Minnesota, but that's still a hell of a job by Trent Frazier.
Dude, this is major Kofi Coburn, Trace Jackson Davis vibes. Like, against everybody else, they're really, really good. And it's like, you get out of their way because they're going to do it. And then there's just somebody who's there. And that's a lot of credit to Trent Frazier, who he has grown into. I don't know what his plan is for next season. I do know if I'm Brett Bielema, I might be hanging out at his apartment looking for a defensive back. It is unbelievable the way that he can get in there into those passing lanes, and all of those like jumped passing lanes that lead to a pick 6 on the other end. That's not even the best part of his defensive play on that particular possession. He just does not relent. And I remember Isaac Trotter, do you remember the press conference? He asked Brad, he said, how is he evolving? He's like, he couldn't guard you when he got here. And Isaac is a fine athlete, I'm sure, but he is no star athlete here. And that's,
I want him on my ARC team / Impy team if you're old school Illinois. But yeah, not so much Big Ten.
And then you have Trent Frazier who has grown into this, like, mad. He is mad if someone scores a bucket on him. And I think he is like, this team, and Brad touched on it a little bit yesterday when he's like, we're not going to tell you what our little mantra is here. I think that this team has so many of those like needles that Brad knows how to just like poke at his team to really fire him up. And for Trent, it's being left off of these defensive awards. For Io, it's something. For everybody, it's something.
I think for Io, we know. I think Brad planted that seed in the media, and everyone went off about it. His family went off. Yeah, his family went off about it. That like, oh, he's not the national player of the year. Well, watch that. Like, look what he's done. That's genius by Brad. And we know Orlando and Chin are planning that stuff, like with Kofi and all of them. That's motivation, but you also have to be able to be pushed. And that's what I love about those guys is Kofi is willing to be yelled at and he likes it and he gets better at it. And Io is fine with Brad. So people that freak out like, oh, Brad, did he needle a superstar too wrong? No, he tweaked them just the way a coach is supposed to tweak them. And they have enough trust in each other and faith in each other that Io took that and said, I'm going to show you, coach. Right. And even if he didn't like Brad for a couple moments, that's not what Brad's job is. Brad's job is to get the most out of his player, and he's certainly doing it.
He is. And I'm telling you, maybe this isn't coming from Brad, though. I have to suspect Brad reminds Trent that he was not on that midseason list. That to me, like, I don't need to ask. I'm sure that is what is a driving factor. And man, he is really, really good. And it's one of those that, like, the 6 steals today are going to get people who are going to, oh my, casual box score, observers be like, oh boy, he might be pretty good at defense. But it's just the rest of it that it's just, he is in your pocket all the time.
He's a pest, and he gets through screens better than anyone I've ever seen. Like, he just because maybe he's smaller, he's quicker, but he just gets through and fights through screens and stays on your hip, right? And just bothers you. He's really good at it. All right, Joe, when we come back, let's look at the road ahead for Illinois. It is on the road, but also a little bit of the Big Ten, because some of the Big Ten's bubble teams not performing very well this weekend. We'll talk about that next. All right, Joey. I do want to say this about Minnesota. That's an embarrassing performance. I know Liam Robbins is hurt, and maybe he shouldn't have played today, to be honest with you. He had 4 assists and 4 blocks, but I felt for that kid today, and Kofi owned him. He had 0 points, I believe. Did he end up with that? Yeah, ended up 0 points on 0 of 4 shooting today. And, but still, you got run off your court, and their effort in the second half was bad. I mean, Illinois had 6 dunks in the second half. What was your favorite? Mine was the Kofi cockback, because I did not know the big man could do that. But Adam Miller's also came out of nowhere.
That was major, was high school vibes. You remember the highlight reels of Kofi? You're like, oh, he's just gonna windmill standing straight up. Probably the Georgie oop. Because I don't even know that Io looked at him, and I didn't even know what Io was doing. Because you couldn't really see Georgie flying, and it's like, oh my God, 6 dunks like that. You talked about it. This is before I got here, dude. There were seasons when this just did not happen, and they made it.
It was all Mav. It was Mav Morgan. That was the only guy who dunked because he was so tall, and now you have that. Like, Kofi had 8 in one game, I believe, and I think you successfully.
I'm strong on my way into it.
Yeah. So what was that, Joey? I think you got a Kofi dunk tracker, or someone doing that?
Kofi dunk tracker on Twitter. I think it's just Dunk Kofi, and personality there, but there's counting the tweets, they're counting the dunks. I think he's in the 50s at this point on the season, which, again, a long freaking time.
Probably topped what they had the whole decade before Kofi arrived.
Dude, and they look so easy. And of course he's 7 feet tall, and of course it's going to look easy, but this is there was a play today, literally everybody from Minnesota just collapsed on him. We don't think you're going to pass it, so figure out what you can do. And he gets that kind of attention. He still just dunks the heck out of it. It's something else.
And I want to say this, kudos to Io for his hard work, but also Fletch. That guy is dunking with ease now. I think Fletch said 11 inches he's gained on his vertical. That's another huge. I mean, think of the little aspects of his game. And again, we're going off on Io here, but we should. He had a post up that I wanted to see what he was going to do with it, and he ended up losing the ball, and it went out of bounds. Got deflected out of bounds. But I haven't seen that before. His mid-range game is ridiculous now. His 3-point percentage is through the roof compared to last year. He just keeps adding and adding, and now you can add explosiveness and dunk. Man, I've seen first round guards, and Iowa's got a lot of traits I would like as an NBA team, especially if you're picking after the lottery.
And he's got a lot of that mental edge to him that he's not going to be outworked. He has got so much of, if I'm the Miami Heat and all we heard about in the bubble was this Heat way, that's that kid all the way through. But yeah, he's got all of the traits, and Fletch gets a lot of credit for that. And the 3-point shooting, you kind of laugh because that has been the knock since the beginning of this kid as a prospect. Was well, can he shoot? Can he shoot? And then, as the draft process goes on after his sophomore year, that's the same question. He shot, was it 29% from 3 as a sophomore, something along those lines. And now he's in the 40s. And that is a lot to me about the body of work and the way that he approaches those things. And how to successfully be needled a little bit and hear that and just attack that part of his game. And it's something else.
Yeah, if you're a playoff team looking for a contributor right away, and somebody who can be a really good, in my opinion, role player, like imagine them on Utah, or the Clippers, or the Lakers, or Philly, or Brooklyn, or Milwaukee, or Golden State, like Toronto, any of those teams, I can see him fitting in, right? Because he's a winner, and he's just got an overall game. Anyway, that's a bad look for Minnesota, who's been great at home. But they are awful on the road, and they are now 6-10 in Big Ten play. They do have Northwestern and Nebraska coming up, but man, like with Robbins playing the way he is and hurt, Kalsher out, this team's in a little bit of trouble. They have a very good schedule remaining. They got Northwestern, Nebraska, Penn State on the road, and Rutgers at home. Those are winnable games, but that was a pretty embarrassing effort for them. And with their injuries, Minnesota could be in trouble. Like they're probably back to the 11 line, but they got great wins. That's the thing is they have great wins. So they probably have to lose out not to make it, or 3 or 4, they're on the bubble. But if they get 2 more, they're probably in, but because of those great wins, but they're in a little bit of trouble. And Indiana, man, I've made the comp of John Gross, that kind of tenure where it just felt like they take 1 step forward and then they take 2 steps back. Indiana felt that way with their loss to Michigan State. They got a tough road. They got Rutgers, Michigan State, Purdue left, 3 or 4 on the road. I think they need to finish 500 in the Big Ten to get there. I mean, I don't know how weak the bubble is, but that's a team that's probably on the wrong side now, which is interesting. Now Maryland's probably getting on the right side. It's going to be fun to watch those teams compete for a spot.
Yeah, kind of a tough day for Big Ten teams on the bubble, and they're done in by other Big Ten teams. Like maybe on the bubble, I don't think Michigan State's on the bubble. Maybe Michigan State works their way into the bubble. It's Tom Izzo, so you keep waiting for that rubber band to snap a little bit and to come back to earth a little bit. Indiana, though, oh boy, that is it's tough sledding, right? I mean,
the message board is not very happy, which I understand.
I understand that too, and you have a legit star. And Trace Jackson Davis. And you remember the preseason, that was a good reason to be excited about that team in the preseason. You got Trace coming back. I love Race Thompson, man. Like Race Thompson is like on that he's not going to be on a Big Ten, like all Big Ten team probably, but like he's that guy he's my first round pick to have on my team today.
He's DeMonte Williams 4 inches taller. Right. Like DeMonte's obviously a better shooter now. But like that kind of glue guy but he's their second guy. Like Armand Franklin's so up and down. And I just haven't seen development from Durham and Finney. And, Christian Lander's way too young. He looks like a 17-year-old playing against men, right? Like, because he is. That's where they struggle, is that guard play. Just, they have not developed that. They have not recruited it.
Look, when Brad Underwood is going all in for like however X number of guards in this one class or whatever it ends up being at some point in his tenure, remember 2020, 2021 Indiana. You cannot have enough guards who do guards things. You just can't. And
that's why John struggled. He couldn't get that guy.
Look at Wisconsin too. I mean, Wisconsin's got issues other than that, but like some of their guards just aren't with the rest of the Big Ten. And now, again, if they want to take the 4th guard in the class, at some point you're gonna do it. We don't care. Yeah. And that's what I mean. Look, we know Kofi and big guys, Hunter Dickinson. That's probably. I mean, you're always gonna have big guys because tall people exist, but guards are it, man. Guards are it, and they can.
Big Ten has all the great big men, basically, besides Drew Timme, right? And Mobley at USC. But
we don't know about these guards, and like there might be one guard on the All Big Ten team.
But he could be the difference of it all. Right. Like he could be the absolute difference of it all. So, all right, Illinois coming up, Michigan State. They looked pretty good today. I still like that matchup, but I think it's going to be a tough game on the road, but you're just so much better offensively than them. You got to rebound. You got to be tough. Cause Michigan State still has Hauser. Aaron Henry's playing great right now, but you have a huge advantage at center. And of course at guard, right? Like you have the 2 best players by far on the court. Then home against Nebraska, at Wisconsin, at Michigan, at Ohio State. Talk about a finish to the season. Those 3 games. So you got to take care of business these next 2, which would be a 9-game win streak. but then at Wisconsin, at Michigan, at Ohio State. Buckle up, let's go, Joey. Like that is such a fun finish to what could be what is really a special year.
So obviously you're going to have the final 2 games are probably going to be top 10 games, games against top 10 teams, you would think. And I don't know what Wisconsin might fall out, but you could have your final 3 games, top 25 games, 2 of them are in the top 10. And then, oh, ho, hum, now you go into the Big Ten tournament. You're going to end up getting a double bye, I have to pretty strongly believe. And then it's just go again. And you got it. I mean, it's got to sharpen you for the next tournament, right? Like, you got to be ready to roll. I mean, this Big Ten, like, I understand, like, maybe there's a little, like, fawning fatigue over the conference. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it. It's good. But numerically, it is, I think they may have just passed the 04 ACC as the best ever. And holy cow. And, the Big 12 might have the best team in America. And it's also a deep league, but
the West Coast Conference might too. But like, that's what's hard about Gonzaga is they are great. And I think they can play with, obviously nobody has beat them. They had a tough non-conference. They don't get tested night in and night out like Illinois does, or even Baylor does, like going through that Big 12.
Dude, I mean, even that Northwestern game, and Northwestern's really going nowhere fast this season, but that is a game that's like, you didn't just get to like coast through it. And
Northwestern is higher in the Ken Palm than St. Mary's.
Yeah.
St. Mary's is the second best team beside what BYU in that conference, or third best team.
Yeah. And Northwestern, when Illinois played them, they're like 72, and like they're this afterthought in the Big Ten race, and they should be because they're at the bottom of the standings, but they're 72 in Ken Palm. It's a tough league, man. And you got to think it's going to pay dividends, because at this point, Illinois has seen everything. I mean, they've been in a lot of different situations. They've gotten out to big leads, they let them go away. They've gotten out to big deficits, they've climbed back. They've been in a lot of situations here that you would think would help them, but hell, we don't know. I mean, tournament's a weird place.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of my first team, all Big Ten, Joey. And Garza, DeSumo, Coburn, Jackson Davis. I even struggle with like Jackson Davis having such a good year, but his team just, I don't want to penalize him too much, but I think EJ Liddell for me is a first teamer. I have him over Trevion Williams and all the Michigan guys. Listen, you can make a case for Dickinson, Livers, and I love Franz Wagner. But I would have all those guys for second team, which is a great second team. And I don't know if I'd have Carr second team, to be honest with you. I think I'd rather go Wieskamp. Like if I was building a team, I think I'd take Wieskamp over Carr. Like that's the way I try to think of these things is I might take Liddell over Jackson Davis.
Yeah. I mean, there's such a like, so Illinois got two objectively good players on 2 really good teams. And then like Ohio State and Michigan are very, very sum of their parts. And that's not a knock because their parts are really freaking good. But like, then you kind of think like, okay, there's so much balanced scoring. It's the same like Jared Butler. Like you talk about, you expand this thing out to National Player of the Year. He very much should be a candidate because he is one of the 3, 4, 5 best players in college basketball. But it's so spread out. Same with, literally anybody on Gonzaga, right? But it's so interesting how like this year feels maybe like more of a divide between like the really, really like just good players and the sum of their parts players who are hurt a little bit because their numbers are down. There's a couple guys, like you said, on Michigan. I think EJ's probably the only one on Ohio State fairly.
Yeah, like Dwayne Washington, I think I have my third team right now. Aaron Henry, Aaron Wiggins, I think I would have in that conversation. Carr, and then Ron Harper is Rutgers really just hasn't been the same team all year. But yeah, I think Michigan deserves a lot of credit. Ohio State, all those guys like CJ Walker's a nice player. I'm a huge fan of Zeg Key as a freshman. Aarons is a fantastic shooter, but yeah, those are more sum of their parts. So I try not to knock them. Like you can make a case for Franz Wagner, as a two-way player. Isaiah Livers, I kind of look at it like who would I pick first if I were doing a draft? And I think Iowa and Garza are 1 and 2. Kofi's 3, and then I'd probably go between Jackson Davis and Liddell, and then I'd probably go with all the Michigan guys and Trevion Williams.
Yeah, and that's Trevion Williams is another guy who's putting up really good numbers on a not so great team. Like, are they still ranked? They might still be ranked. I'm drawing a blank, but like they're not going to.
No, they're playing Nebraska right now, and they're winning, so they'll probably be ranked next week.
but not the best team Purdue has ever put on a basketball court. But Trevion Williams is, dude, he just continues to put up numbers. Like, he is something else. He's fun to watch. But there's a lot of, like, the Big Ten is expanded out a little further, Jeremy. Like, how many Big Ten guys are going to be on these All-American teams?
Oh, well, Garza. I mean, you saw it today. The Wooden Awards 7 of 20, right? And they don't have Liddell on that list, which I think is crazy because I take Liddell over some of those other Big Ten guys. Yeah, Garza's a first teamer. I think Desumu's a first teamer. And Kofi really has a case. I don't think he'll get it, Joey, because Io's getting all the love. And, you got to put Butler on there. You got to put somebody from Gonzaga on there. I'm not putting like Cade Cunningham over Kofi though, right? Like I'm not going to put any of those guys. And Kofi right now is number 10 again in the Ken Pom. So I think that'll help him too.
Dude, there's nobody like Kofi had a one-on-one today with, I think it was probably Liam or some other, unfortunate person who had to try to stop him one-on-one, but like, it's automatic. It just like that one-on-one with Kofi within an arm's length of the basket or within like a reasonable step, it's over. It gets automatic. And I don't know. And again, maybe because we've watched so much of Kofi this season, but you just don't get him. You don't stop him one-on-one. It's just not happening. And that is a credit to where his game has grown, because a year ago, Jeremy, one-on-one with Kofi, he had such a limited arsenal of moves that he could do to get you. And now all of that has been kind of eradicated. And, he opened up with some bank hook shot that I was like, oh boy, this is not going to go well. And it did go well, but credit to him, right? And how he's evolved. And to your point, like if you were to step back and think of it like that, like his numbers are really good, but also he passes everything in the eye test with what you're looking for in a college big man.
And his development, I mean,
crazy.
The staff deserves a ton of credit for that. Antigua, Fletch, Underwood, Gentry, Chan, like all those guys. With both those players, I mean, I never thought had this level to him. And Kofi, the thing you thought was this guy's going to be big, burly, probably raw, right? Make a lot of mistakes. And he had some of that as a freshman, but he was a great Big Ten freshman of the year. And now, he had a couple of fumbles early in the game. Like, I jinxed him. All of a sudden, Kofi hands are back, but then it wasn't an issue the rest of the game. Defensively, he got so much better.
Just this year. I mean, there were the Baylor game, and there was a couple other games where I remember thinking like, oh my God, if this is what it's going to be, this is not the ceiling that this team thought it was going to have if he's got the Kofi hand situation. And it just went away. Like, I don't even remember it being, and maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly because it's been a long year, but like, I don't remember it being like progressive, right? It was like, okay, not good, not good, not good. Oh, everything's fine again. Like, it wasn't like this slow wean off of Kofi hands. And credit to him, because he's developed as well in season.
Yeah.
As a lot, like, most of the times guys come back and they've had the off season, they're just objectively and visibly better. Kofi has done a lot of that since November, and that is kind of crazy.
Yeah, since Baylor, right? Like Baylor, he got in the foul trouble. The first 3 games, like he walked into double-doubles in those games. It was just like, yeah, those weren't great games. We had those conversations then. During Big Ten play, he's been, I mean, you could argue at times, better than Io, right? Like more important than Io at certain points of Big Ten play. He's just been consistently dominant, and it has been something to watch. Joey, now the national attention, the spotlight, we see it. Pat Forty writes a story. Shannon writes a great feature this week. Chicago Tribune. Io goes on the score, and you're starting to feel like they're going to start coming. Like the national media is going to start coming, doing big stories on this team because they deserve it. And in a win like that, the stars you have, the personalities you have, and just the cachet of Illinois basketball being back. It's going to start getting a lot of national attention now as we get closer and closer to March, but this team is so deserving of it.
I remember freshman year, like when Georgie's freshman year, like we kind of got to know him a little bit, and you're like, oh, this guy's something. Like, this is a fun guy. And I remember thinking like, boy, wait till other people find out about him, because they are going to love him. And sure enough, wasn't it the Michigan State game? He's dancing with reporters pregame, and it's like, yeah, now everybody kind of kind of knows a little bit, and he's just one. And Kofi didn't take long. And you're right, the personalities. It's a really quotable team. It's a really media savvy team. They understand, they're not afraid to really let us in a little bit. National reporters are going to eat it up. I mean, we know it as well as anything. To hear Io, just quickly to tangent on this, to hear Io on the score yesterday, there was so much of a genuineness about that. And I know, I didn't grow up near Chicago. I know the score, I think, was a big deal for you maybe growing up, and it obviously was for Io. And it matters, like that premier radio station and that market matters to a lot of people. And to hear just how, not that I don't think Io's ever like bad with us, or like he doesn't appreciate, like he understands we've got a job. We understand he understands the dynamic with us, but to hear him really like, holy crap, like that was the first time I remember him like at least showing that, holy crap, this is awesome, right? Like that was, he doesn't let that out. He's a pro. He doesn't let that out very often, but that was pretty cool, man. Like he's like, man, me and my dad used to listen to this driving around. It's like, how cool. Like, again, he doesn't show that side because a lot of this is so routine to him after the career he's had dating back to high school, and he got a lot of much deserved attention. But that was pretty cool, man. That was a cool time.
No, yeah, it's been cool to watch. It's cool to see, the national people take these stories, because there are so many good stories, whether it's Io and his dad and his family, or Kofi, where his background comes from, Andre Curbelo, just how flashy he is, his background. There's a lot of good stories with this team, and you'll get to hear a lot more of them from the national media here coming up. All right, Joey, that's a pretty good feel-good game for Illini fans, I would think.
Yeah, I think they were looking for that, man. The last two, I think, like people were cautiously excited, and this really put a lot of that right to bed.
All right, Joey, talk to you later, man.
All right, man.